of the words. But tell me a little bit about your feelings about Nelson Mandela and what he meant to you.
Well,
and to
Mandela
us.
was a giant, as everyone knows, and when the whole anti-apartheid situation started to bubble to the masses, I was a young man in Los Angeles, and I was an undergrad, and oppression and just seeing what was going on in the streets and the I Won't Play Sun City, the hip hop kind of got into my head, and we realized what was going on. And as college students, we were like, look, why are we sitting here watching this on TV? There's a South African consulate right down in LA. So we went down there, joined the protests, we're throwing rocks at the consulate, all that good
rock
stuff.
Throwing.
Hey man, in California we get down.
Okay.
And then when he was freed and he came to Los Angeles, our whole crew, we went down and greeted him with the millions or thousands of others that were down in Los Angeles. I have video footage of that. So
great.
Mandela is a pillar. He's changed the world. He's such a humble man. He's just an incredible figure in our community.
Yeah, the bottom line is things had sort of fallen off the radar of the struggle for freedom, social justice, economic justice, until Randall Robinson and Trans-Africa said, look, we got a major problem in South Africa that's analogous to our situation here. And so I definitely want to take my hat off to Randall Robinson for launching that first protest at the South African embassy in DC. I guess it was 1984, 85. Don't quote me on it, but mid 80s. I can safely say that. And that was the trigger that got you guys out in LA and got the rest of the country, and the divestment movement started from there.
Yeah, I have to say that Congressman Ron Dellums also did a great amount of work to help free Mandela. And then, transferred to today with Barbara Lee, who took Ron Dellums' seat. She was the only one person that voted against the war in Afghanistan. So, there's that tradition.
Yeah. And the tribute for Mandela actually coincided beautifully because last week, like a week and a half when this airs, your Film and Culture series actually rescreened Al Santana's Durban 400 because you were of the opinion, and you want to express it in your own words, that it was time once again for getting back to that discussion that got sidetracked. The brief history: Durban 400, the World Conference Against Xenophobia and Racism, 2001. Briefly tell our audience.
Well, I have to give the kudos to Omawale Clay and Loretta Duncan and Voila Plummer, with the December 12th movement.
Mm-hmm.
They are leading the charge for the reparations movement. Back in 2001, there was the World Conference on Racism in South Africa, and through the efforts of the December 12th movement and many others that are involved with the reparations movement, the conference, the forum, the body declared the transatlantic slave trade a crime against humanity. And so at that point, the reparations movement was really building a lot of steam. And then, of course, you had the 9/11 situation at the World Trade Center, and so things kind of fell under the rug. But Mr. Santana made an incredible film of their journey to South Africa. So at this time, we re-aired that film, and the movement's picking back up with all of the 12 Years a Slave, all of the new the Butler, all of the education that's coming out because of these new films and the work that you've done.
It was interesting because just before that conference, I had gotten a message from Karen Mafundikwa, another filmmaker who is a member of the Black Documentary Collective that St. Clair Bourne founded. And Karen and her husband are now living in Zimbabwe. But Karen has been working on this labor of love on just this whole issue. And so she asked me to screen her rough cut because she needed to just finalize it. It's been a long labor of love. She's ready to take it in the post, and she just wanted to make sure. So I'd done a similar thing when her husband had done his piece on Zimbabwe, on Mugabe and post-Mugabe. And so I had just finished screening that rough cut when your email popped in to say Durban 400 rescreening, and because of the nature of how her film is progressing or has progressed, because that rough cut is amazing. Karen, her working title is The Price of Memory, and it's one of the most eloquent and understated but scathing indictment of that transatlantic slave trade, primarily focusing on the relationship between Jamaica and Great Britain, but it basically calls all those European nations to task and points the finger at what has done, decimating those Caribbean communities. So when Omowale Clay was speaking in your forum on Friday, he was talking about the fact that the Caribbean nations have now taken this thing to another level, because they know that the movement got sidetracked out of Durban because of 9/11 and the basic global police state that ensued.
Yeah.
So tell me what you think is going to come out of your pickup with them, and what your plans are for other screenings that might help to galvanize this movement before we start talking about these films that, because parts of the Durban 400 movement is in Karen's film, the whole CARICOM movement is in her film, so this is going to come out just in a timely manner.
Well, I'm excited. I want to see that film.
Oh, it's a powerful film.
I really want to see that film. I just think, as Dr. King said, the arc of justice is long, but it bends towards the
moral arc.
The moral arc. It bends towards justice, and things are coming to light these days. And we have access to more information. People are doing research. There's more scholarship. So all this information is coming out. And once this information comes out, it's going to come to the head. We don't have enough conversations, enough racial justice conversations. And until we do, I think we're going to be in this situation where people are unhappy. People know there's something wrong. We have to make the situation right. And I think with the reparations movement, that's a part of the foundational understanding for all people of African descent and people here in America, white Americans and all others that understand the history of this country, how Africans were oppressed and got no compensation for their work. And the payment is due, the check is due. And so this is just picking that movement and understanding up along with all the other things that are coming about.
Yeah, Karen's film, The Price of Memory, is the working title. The underlying theme is who pays, who has paid, who is paying, and the fact that that conference against racism and xenophobia took place in South Africa, and then Mandela's passing and his memorial service right on the heels of all these new looks at slavery and the long legacy of slavery. It's interesting because her film is a really honest and powerful account of that arc on that transatlantic slave trade. And why it struck me is because I know you saw 12 Years a Slave. I know you just mentioned it. 12 Years a Slave is an equally unblinking eye. It takes an equally unblinking look at slavery. And despite what a lot of the white commentators have been saying about it being a horror film and really difficult, it really is an understated version of Solomon Northup's story, of his enslavement and what he endured and what his fellow enslaved individuals. And that film cast an unblinking but actually filtered eye. But because it's so accurate and so honest, it takes most of these white commentators aback, because they don't really look at slavery through the eyes of the enslaved people ever. And you know, because thanks to you, one of the early accolades that Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home got was your film festival in McAfee, when we got, I forget what it was, the best documentary for whatever. We take a look at that historical arc, and we look at it, it's American history from the perspective of the enslaved people. But we don't cover it. We cover it like Steve McQueen does. his is basically a triumphant arc, even though there's a lot of suffering. You see, and I'm going to get your take on this because I know you've got. My take is you see the stark determination not to lose one's sense of self
Absolutely.
and one's human dignity. Tell me what your big takeaway and your big scene moment was in 12 Years a Slave, and I'll compare yours and mine.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, but there's so many pieces to it. It's such an important film because those of us who have seen Roots, or those of us who know about the enslavement experience, 12 Years a Slave doesn't show you anything new. For me, it shows you how ingrained and just a part of our everyday system slavery was. There were so many industries around slavery that wouldn't exist but for these slaves. And so it wasn't, for me, it wasn't that brutal. Yes, there were horrible parts to the movie, but I've seen those horrible parts. I've read those books. I've seen those images. But this shows you how, there's a guy hanging from a tree, and I don't want to give too much away, but the kids are playing because that's their normalcy. So slavery was so normal in our country that's what struck me, that people wouldn't resist, that wouldn't fight in the ways that I wish they would have at that time.
Here is one of the things that because I've dug into that so deeply, we've got like 16 and a half hours between the television version of Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home and the radio in-depth version. We're looking at that whole arc of resistance and rebellion and how subtle or overt it might be. And so
I don't want to be mistaken to think that they didn't resist.
No. I know what you're saying.
Right.
But there are certain forms of resistance that folk sometimes might slide away from and don't do. And like you say, you don't want to give anything away for folks who haven't seen the film. But there are a couple of scenes there about resisting to prove your human dignity, and that bar of soap is a seminal symbol. And I will say no more for you folk who have not seen that film, but you must go see it so you can get to the bar of soap.
Well, I have to say this in defense of myself in a way. I, along with one of my comrades, Reginald Gustave, who runs the Urban Ambassadors program here in New York, we brought a bunch of young men to see the film. We had about 20 or more young men, and so we talked after the film. And I explained to them that I was the man in the boat, and the bottom of the boat, that said the rest of these cats probably won't even fight. And then when the overseer came down at night and he was taken out, because he was defending the woman, that was me. I don't want to give too much away, but there were those that just couldn't take it and would do anything for a bar of soap.
But disregarding the order of the individual who has the power of life and death over you to get that bar of soap.
Yes.
You can't get more rebellious than that. So yeah. Now, the interesting thing about 12 Years a Slave is that you can see the heroism and the defense of self and self-awareness throughout that movie, in the long arc of Solomon Northup's story and in the short arc of Patsy's story, right within the same film. Now, I'm contrasting that film with the African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross, the PBS series that just recently aired. It's a Henry Louis Gates attempt at telling the African American story. And I don't know how many of the episodes you had a chance to see, but give me your take and contrast on 12 Years a Slave and whatever you may have seen on.
Well, Henry Louis Gates is in academia, and I feel that he has to produce these documents that are comfortable for everyone. He wants
comfortable.
He
Good
wants
word.
he wants to make people aware, but he's also in Harvard and other places where he has bosses and things of that nature. So he presents this information, and maybe not the way I would present it, or you would present it, or some of our other warrior scholars would present it. So the information is important, and we should always talk about the information that's presented and critique it. But I would hope that all young people would see 12 Years a Slave, would see Fruitvale Station, would see The Butler. The eyes on the prize, I think it was a little bit more powerful.
Basically, there was no power in 6 episodes of whatever we wanted to call that. I'm just basically going to dissect it as an individual who's done filmmaking that covers that period. And trust me, we have to talk about sometime next year when we try to set up a program so we can screen, then I'll be free to travel home. We're going to do that, right?
February.
Yes, okay, fine. We'll pin down a date because what we need to do, and I need to do this in more than one venue and more than one location, is to give people a sense of what that historical arc really is. Because within, first of all, the African American struggle was not just about escaping slavery from the South. All 13 colonies had slaves, practice enslavement of Africans. And within the context of slavery being rejected in the North and being perpetuated in the South is the dichotomy that still gives you red states and blue states today.
Absolutely.
Those are the kinds of historical perspective that we don't get from this man's
Absolutely.
series. What we also don't get from his series is any positive look at who we are as a people. The bulk of his series tends to deal with us from a negative perspective. Even when he's giving us some kind of anecdotal, historical, I'll give you a key example. That one segment that he did about Jefferson Davis's mansion that fell into the hands of formerly enslaved individuals, one of whom became one of the biggest cotton farmers in Mississippi. It turns out that after being a successful cotton farmer, he then got elected. They imploded during some recession, so they moved off to set up an all-black town, and from that all-black town, he became the only black member of the Mississippi State Legislature. And the payoff and punchline to that supposed success story of being one of the biggest planters in Mississippi, who then fell on hard times and set up his own black town and went to the legislature, was he then voted for the Mississippi law that said that black people can't vote and can never vote and will never be able to vote. And so that's the legacy we had to come out from under Mississippi all those years. So what was supposedly a positive has a negative punchline. Within the same period, you could have had a similar story of Tarrant and company, those formerly enslaved individuals who came out of the Civil War. The white schoolhouse that they built as enslaved laborers prior to going off fighting the Civil War, they came back, raised the funds, bought that building, set that building up as the key and core center for what would eventually become Talladega College. Okay? So now you have similar stories, formerly owned by whites, transitioned to African Americans, former slaves, now freedmen. What they're doing is they're building on an educational legacy that, if only 10% of the enslaved may have been literate when the Civil War started and ended, flip that to almost a 90 ratio because, and this is what didn't show up in his series at all, that whole legacy of each one teaching one. Once somebody learns, they go out and build up schools and they teach. And that whole historically black college university network that was built by those formerly enslaved, that comes right out of Reconstruction. And they're doing that when the Knights of the Camellia are charging down on them, trying to kill, rape, and maim, when the Ku Klux Klan is trying to do similar things. We don't get any of that in this man's series. And that's why I'm saying, to quote another college classmate of his, who I didn't get permission to name, so I won't, he says, he doesn't work for us, he works for them. You say comfortable, I say, okay, that's one way of telling it. So
I don't want to beat up on the man, but
I do.
I hear you, but
you do not waste opportunities. He gets money to supposedly tell our stories or tell the African American story. He needs to be telling it properly. So I go.
No. I'm not going to disagree with what you're saying. But you understand why he may not present what you would like for him to present.
It's not what I would like for him to present. I'm a filmmaker, but I'm also a journalist.
Okay.
I mean, you don't stop becoming a journalist because you become a filmmaker.
Right.
You are what you are. Filmmaking, documentary filmmaking is part of journalism. If you're going to take the time to try to tell the story, you need to try to tell the story properly. Let's just say, even if he just spent some time talking about some of the individuals who helped bring us out of enslavement, white and black, North and South. Primarily, you had a lot of black folks in the abolitionist movement. Wasn't covered well in the PBS series, The Abolitionists, barely touched on. He has the opportunity to actually, David Walker. If there's no David Walker, there is no liberator, because William Lloyd Garrison was inspired by David Walker. Folks, David Walker is the guy who wrote the pamphlet that basically subscribes to, by any means necessary, take your freedom. And David Walker, because he's disseminated that pamphlet, Walker's Appeal to people of color, which says, rise up from your masters, loose those chains any way you can, even if you have to slaughter them to do that. That's what inspired the abolitionist movement. Now, he was killed because there was a price on his head.
I would put Dr. Gates in the same, not the same vein, but in a vein of trying to survive in these white institutions in the same way that Solomon Northup tried to survive on the plantation. In order to get to his freedom, Gates, in order to remain in these institutions and be able to tell part of the stories, I think it's a self-survival thing. But I do want to go back to your point where you said how this legacy is still here today in these red states and the voter ID laws and the stop and frisk. That's why these films, and it is important that when you have an opportunity to tell the story, you tell the actual, the important part for our liberation. So I agree with you 100%. But that brother's in his lane. He might be driving too slow in that lane, but that's his lane.
Well, you're right to a certain degree, but see, I would call Solomon Northup a truly heroic individual.
Absolutely.
Because
I was just giving
he
you
does not sacrifice
an analogy.
He does not sacrifice his sense of self or his own human dignity, or at least he tries his best not to sacrifice that. He may actually, and of course he did in that really, quote, brutal scene that's in the movie, in his true story, 10 times more, of course, that he had to whip that young lady. Now, for me, the courageous part is not the remorse for doing it, but having the guts to go ahead and tell the story of what you did years later. I mean, that is just, that's got to pain you twice as much, because you knew, even though you had no choice, you were seriously inflicting serious bodily harm on someone. So that, for me, is even more courageous. Right. So to be able to tell that. So I see none of that courage in anything Gates is putting out. Okay. Okay, that's fair. That's me. So I think maybe we got like 2 minutes left. And I didn't even get into the filmmaking aspects of his series, whereas 12 Years a Slave was beautifully shot, extremely well edited, phenomenally acted. I don't have enough time to tell you how I rip apart these long walking wallpaper shots.
Yeah.
It's just useless stuff. But anyway, wrap up for me, because minute and a half.
Well, I respect your view and your opinion on that, and I wish that you would be able to bring more filmmakers their work to light, and that's what my interest is. You have set a standard where you've created an incredible document, and others should follow to unearth this information and share with all of us like you've done. And so any way that I can continue to work with you to make these kind of things happen,
we will do that. Guess what? You reminded me, folks. You go to www.evted.org. Download that free episode of the audio version so you have something to push back and inure yourself against some of that poisonous stuff you're getting elsewhere. We're about out of time. This has been NYABJ Media Watch. I'm Eric Tait. Miles McAfee.
Thank you so
producer, Film and Culture Series at Medgar.
College.
Always a pleasure, brother.
Pleasure,
Good to
man.
see you.
Thank you.
We'll catch you the next time.
How was it?
Blue, that Gates guy.